Tonight on 48 Hours.
The woman was screaming desperately for help. He was pounding her head against the wall.
Violence.
She was going to be killed.
And athletes. What happens when they break the rules?
The few athletes who commit these acts are welcomed in by the coaches as long as they can perform on the field.
You're Miss Nebraska.
A woman.
Natalie Kuyvenhoven.
Takes the offensive.
I didn't want to live with the feeling that he assaulted me or that he was assaulting other women.
A player.
Being out here in the field, I felt like a god. He lost touch with what was reality.
Faces his past.
I knew violence when I was young, and I became an abusive man when I grew up.
The kids.
You have to be aggressive. It's just the nature of the sport.
What's in their future?
It's pretty fun to hit a kid.
The painful price of victory.
You remember what they called you? The Great White Hope.
A 48 hours investigation.
So basically, the victim was paid off.
They feel they're special and they can get away with anything.
Tonight, join Dan Rather with correspondents Harold Dow, Bill Lagatuda, Aaron Moriarty, Richard Schlesinger, and Susan Spencer. "48 Hours, Violent Athletes." From New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. It's an autumn ritual, the weekend football game. In less than 48 hours, fans will again crowd into stadiums to cheer their favorite team. But after the cheering stops, it may be another story. A story of hard-hitting aggression, not against an opposing team, but against a wife, a girlfriend, even a stranger. For 3 months, 48 Hours has been investigating the causes and consequences of sports violence. Tonight, we take you to a dangerous world off the field, a world without bounds, sometimes without penalties, but a world where no one wins.
The woman was screaming desperately for help.
Was she screaming loudly?
Oh, blood-curdling. You can't just hear about it. You have to see it and hear it.
Sandy Worm saw it and heard it.
It was a desperate scream for help.
It was September 10th, a little before dawn.
It was 4:30 in the morning. You were in the bed sleeping.
Right.
Suddenly, the walls began shaking.
So I ran out of my bedroom, and this shelf and picture were on the floor, apparently from him dragging her down the stairs, because the stairs are just on the other side of that wall. So I ran out here to see what the source of the screams were.
A man was attacking a woman.
And as I got to this point, I could see where he had her by the head in the corner and was pounding her head against the wall, and she was kind of slumping to the floor. I mean, I was truly afraid she was going to be killed.
Sandy called the police, while two other women across the hall,
We just bolted out of the apartment.
Lori Clark and Nicole Finner, rushed to help.
They both fell backwards into this corner right over here.
They fell on the floor, both of them?
Yeah, they both hit here and smashed here, and you can still kind of see where it was dented. It was much worse. There was one mailbox that was completely pushed in, and they've been pounded out, and they both hit the floor. And you can...
There's stains of where Kate's blood was. They cleaned it up, but it kind of stained the cement in between.
After the women were able to rescue the victim, University of Nebraska junior Kate McEwen, her assailant reportedly punched a mailbox in anger.
Have either of you ever seen anything like this before?
Absolutely not.
Not quite that violent.
No?
No.
Sandy?
Not that violent.
McEwen's attacker ran off, and not long before police came to claim her bloody T-shirt from Lori Clark,
Your hands were trembling.
It just kind of all hit me at once, like kind of a shock.
and even more shocking,
another football player for the Cornhusker football team is in trouble with the law tonight.
Kate McEwen's attacker was one of the stars of Nebraska's football team, Lawrence Phillips.
Phillips was put in jail, charged with misdemeanor assault and trespassing.
Lawrence has come up the hard way. When basically you're out without any parents at age 11 and you're on your own, you find a way to get by. Some of the survival techniques he's had have led to him getting in some trouble.
Nebraska coach Tom Osborne knows plenty about players getting into trouble, and a good offense, taking on team critics, is part of the drill.
I'm a little edgy right now, and it just kind of weighs on me when guys that are 19, 20 years old are held accountable, and everybody is accountable. Sometimes these guys are held to a standard that's pretty difficult.
But at Nebraska, it's not just Lawrence Phillips. He is one of several players accused of crimes or violence in recent years.
Three-step drop.
Among them,
Tyrone with a big stick on Mustafa.
cornerback Tyrone Williams, accused of shooting at a car with 2 people inside. Reggie Ball, guilty of possession of stolen property. And Riley Washington, facing attempted second-degree murder charges. One of the nation's powerhouses making headlines, not for its on-the-field success, but its off-the-field problems. But the University of Nebraska is hardly in a league of its own.
4 ISU football players accused of having sex with 2 14-year-olds.
Players getting arrested, charges including
allegedly raped her and had sex with her against her will.
From the nation's college campuses to the pros. From Warren Moon.
Felicia Moon said her husband had hit her with an open hand in the head and had choked her.
To Mike Tyson. Hardly a week goes by without some athlete and some violent incident making the news.
Welcome to the college football capital of the world, Lincoln, Nebraska.
With the Phillips incident,
has your enthusiasm in any way been dampened?
My enthusiasm for Nebraska football hasn't diminished any.
It's an issue that Lincoln and its football fanatics are debating under a national spotlight. At its heart, should Phillips remain on the team?
Apparently, Lawrence Phillips has been released from the football team. He is no longer a Cornhusker football player. We received a fax from the University Athletic Department. We have told all our players that abusive behavior will not be tolerated. He is dismissed from the football team, effective immediately.
We've lost a great player in Lawrence Phillips.
Even while defending his players, Coach Osborne is taking a hard line.
It isn't a case where anybody's abandoning Lawrence Phillips. You know, we will continue to support him as far as his education is concerned, and emotionally and every other way that we can. Unfortunately, he will not play for quite a while, if at all.
But this isn't case closed for Lawrence Phillips.
It's up! Women are in!
His story hasn't even reached halftime, as you'll see during our 48 hours.
When our investigation continues,
I was sexually assaulted by him.
women speak out
Twice. He assaulted me twice in the same place.
and raise troubling charges.
I reported it and nothing was done about it.
And later,
I felt like a god.
one sports hero and his dark past.
There was a problem. I hit.
In Nebraska, the fields are gold. But the real cash crop is red and white.
Football is next to God, and we eat, drink, and live it.
The Huskers off to a great start.
College football is worth millions of dollars to the local economy.
Nebraskans go wild over their team.
Which may explain why Kate McEwen, the woman assaulted by Lawrence Phillips, is not talking to the press, is so reluctant to tell her side of the story.
If she went on and testified against this guy, it would be like, why are you doing this to him?
Shelley Smith has been covering the Lawrence Phillips incident for Sports Illustrated.
The victim is not Catherine McEwen in the fans' eyes. The victim is Lawrence Phillips.
Athletes in general often enjoy a special status that protects them on or off the field. The legal system, which works one way when either you or I commit a crime, can operate quite differently when an athlete does.
It's a select few that do it, but they basically have an unimpeded license to do it.
Researcher Jeff Benedict.
There's like a wall of insulation that goes up around them.
He spent 3 years studying criminal complaints filed against both college and professional athletes.
Are you saying an athlete would be less likely to be convicted?
Much less likely.
In Nebraska, we found that wall of insulation nearly impossible to penetrate, from the athletic department to the Lincoln Police Department, to the county attorney's office. We found few people willing to talk. So ultimately, we looked to recent history and through a lot of court documents to see if some athletes slipped through the system. And that led us to the case of number 55 defensive tackle, Christian Peter.
Christian Peter, the first to get to him.
Over 2 years, beginning in 1991, he was arrested by police a half dozen times. Almost every case was either dismissed or resolved with a small fine. And there were other charges, more serious charges, that never even made it to court.
I was sexually assaulted by him. I was talking to him and I did kiss him. He didn't stop after kissing me, and he pinned me down and pretty much enjoyed himself on me without my consent.
This wasn't the first time Christian Peter had been accused of sexual misconduct. Still, Melissa DeMuth never got her day in court.
I reported it and nothing was done about it. I wasn't given the option of pressing charges.
Melissa believes it was because she was working in the bar where she met Peter, and both had been drinking. As a result, she says,
they didn't believe me. They didn't give me the chance to explain it. They automatically took his side over mine.
Prosecutors say they didn't have the evidence to file charges.
It wasn't prosecuted because no one believed her story.
Peter's attorney, Gary Fox.
She was there voluntarily at the apartment, and everything and anything that occurred was consistent with the laws.
If you're going to bring a sexual assault allegation against an athlete, your background has to be so pristine that it will be able to withstand scrutiny that will go back to childhood.
The woman catches hell. The woman pays the price.
Kathy Redmond claims she was also assaulted by Christian Peter.
I was raped twice in one weekend.
Once again, no charges filed. Prosecutors say they doubted Redmond's story, in part because she waited more than 2 years to report the alleged rape.
The determination was made that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute Christian criminally.
I was not about to make waves. As an 18-year-old in Lincoln, Nebraska, there's no way. I was not that strong a person. I was still a child.
What you see here is that it almost requires a beauty queen to convict an athlete.
You're Miss Nebraska for 1992.
In fact, that's exactly what it took.
Natalie Kivenhoven, Miss Great Plains.
A former Miss Nebraska, Natalie Kivenhoven.
It happened twice. He assaulted me twice in the same place. Did you know this person? Absolutely not.
Natalie Kivenhoven was in a campus bar when Christian Peter groped her under her clothing. This time, he met his match.
Her reputation was such that she could match, and in this case, overcome his reputation. His reputation is basically embedded in Nebraska football.
I was scared of retaliation, against me for pressing charges against him.
Why did you do it then? If you were scared, why did you decide to press charges?
I didn't want to live with the feeling that he assaulted me or that he was assaulting other women and that I didn't do anything about it.
Christian Peter, who denies he assaulted either Melissa DeMuth or Kathy Redmond, did plead no contest in Natalie Kivenhoven's case and was convicted of third-degree sexual assault. His punishment? 20 months probation.
If you look at May of 1993, which is the last time that he ever got into trouble, up until now, there isn't a blemish. The persona that has been painted of him is absolutely incorrect. That's the on-field person, but that's not him off the field.
But Kathy Redmond says she can't forget the past. When police refused to act on her complaint, she filed suit against both the university and Christian Peter.
What she's asking for in the complaint is money. That's what the case is about. Is she going to get paid money?
Has anything happened to Christian Peter since you filed a report?
No. Well, he's been made captain of the football team.
Sex offenders in our society are pariahs in most cases. In the case with an athlete, he puts a uniform on. He's not a pariah, he's a role model. He's allowed to go back out on the field and be cheered for by 100,000 people on Saturday.
But not everyone is cheering.
I think people need to understand that some of their football players are criminals.
This man is breaking his silence when 48 Hours returns.
Also coming up,
there was a problem. I hit.
Out of bounds and on the record.
Yes, I was an abusive man.
A football star tells his story.
What made you abusive? Growing up, it was all I knew. It's all I saw.
Nobody does it like him.
And now Tony Bennett's teaching a whole new audience to swing.
See him live on our stage.
Tomorrow on the new CBS This Morning.
If Tom Osborne is any proof, you don't have to run for office to run a town.
He's untouchable. He's a legend.
That's why in Lincoln, Nebraska, you have to think long and hard before you tackle the football coach or his program. Did you take a risk talking today?
Yes.
After years of silence, this man is speaking out from the shadows.
I think people need to understand that some of their football players are criminals.
The words are his, the voice is not.
Coach Osborne may very well feel that he's doing them good by giving them a chance. But by protecting the kids, I don't think he's doing them any good at all.
We met with him in Lincoln. He's associated with the legal system, and he says when it comes to university athletes,
we have to humbly present ourselves to the coaching staff in order to seek an audience with a football player, to ask that football player some questions about a crime he may or may not have committed.
Would you have to do that with anybody else other than an athlete?
Well, maybe Governor Nelson or some high political figure.
They're treated that special, like the governor of the state.
Well, probably a little bit more respectful. The governor doesn't get to stand out on the football field.
Osborne is not a bad person. You know, he cares about these kids, but he's overstepping his boundaries.
In the case of Lawrence Phillips, according to Sports Illustrated's Shelley Smith, it works like this.
Tom Osborne talked to Kate McEwen before the county attorney talked to Kate McEwen. He was at her house the Monday after the incident, talking with her and her family.
It's pretty common knowledge that someone from the athletic department will contact victims, especially those involved in violent crimes, either directly or indirectly.
And that's not all. Take the case of number 8 defensive back Tyrone Williams. Days after Williams was charged with shooting at a moving car, police were still looking for the weapon. The assistant coach held on to the gun?
Yes.
As it turns out, one of Osborne's assistant coaches had the gun. He had gotten it from Williams, then kept it locked in the team's offices for 2 days. Was the coach at that time aware that the police were looking for this particular weapon?
Yes.
And held on to it in the athletic department offices anyway?
Yes.
Coach Osborne says no one was trying to hide the gun. According to a Lincoln Police Department report obtained by 48 Hours, he told investigators he thought the weapon had already been picked up by university police. But Osborne admits he was conducting his own investigation. According to that same Lincoln Police report, he even called one of the victims, the woman driving the car, and told her the weapon, a .22 caliber revolver like this, was just a little bigger than a BB gun.
Oh, it's garbage. I'll take Coach Osborne to a cemetery and show him lots of dead people who've been killed by .22s.
Tyrone Williams, who says he's not guilty, is still on the team. Because of court appeals, his case has now been postponed through 2 football seasons. What's the risk then when there's that kind of delay?
Unless the law enforcement aspect keeps in close contact with victims and witnesses. Those victims and witnesses will be gone. And everyone knows without victims or witnesses, you don't have a prosecution. Without a prosecution, someone can shoot up a car with a handgun and walk.
And then there are cases where the victims themselves give the athletes a break. Do you have any eyesight in that eye?
No, I don't.
Nothing, you can't see?
No.
At Nebraska, you can't talk about athletes and violence without talking about what defensive tackle Jason Jenkins did to Jeremy Sperling.
The lens was ripped out and part of the pupil was cut off.
Hitting him in the right eye with a beer bottle. Jenkins was charged with first-degree assault, facing up to 20 years in prison. But for some reason, the case never went to trial, and Jenkins ended up with probation. The question is, what happened? The victim was unavailable to testify. That's all Jenkins' attorney, Hal Anderson, would tell us. Anderson, incidentally, represents a number of Nebraska players who run afoul of the law.
That's Jason Jenkins. He's right at 6'5", 290.
But the 23-year-old victim says there's a reason why he didn't want to testify.
We were awarded some money, to reduce the charges.
It was $25,000, but $3,000 of it went to social services and then Jeremy's attorney. So Jeremy ended up with, I think, $15,000.
It was an agreement first proposed by Jeremy's attorney. Jenkins would pay money up front with the prospect of more later, especially if Jenkins makes it to the pros. Jeremy's family says it's his only hope to pay for the eye operations he needs.
Versus if we locked him up and he went to the pen for 7 to 10 years, Jeremy would get nothing.
We didn't really feel we had much choice. It was either that or nothing.
But without Jeremy's testimony, prosecutors say they had no choice but to let Jenkins plead guilty to a much lesser charge. He got probation. He's also supposed to serve 60 days in jail, but not until after his Nebraska career. Armed with the full story, we went back to Jenkins' attorney. You told me that the victim was unavailable. There was money here involved. He was given $25,000.
That's part of it. There was a civil settlement, but I didn't tell you that because it was not I didn't have the right to tell you what the amount of the settlement was.
So basically, the victim was paid off.
Goodbye.
This kind of arrangement is not illegal, but the Sperlings now feel Jason Jenkins got off too easy.
He went ahead and he got a college education paid for by the state of Nebraska. And Jeremy sits here with nothing, or with one eye.
I'd do anything to get my eye back. I'd give anything back, do anything. I miss it that much. I wish we just would have sent him to jail.
I think we probably should have gone ahead because it's got to stop sometime. And it doesn't. I mean, it just goes on, and they feel they're special, and they can get away with anything.
The victims are the losers. They're victimized twice. The first time when the act is committed, and then throughout the system.
I hold myself accountable for every action that I've done in my life.
In professional sports, perception and reality can be very different.
I realized that there was a problem.
This man was a hero, but he was also hiding something.
I was an abusive man. I hit.
Pro football player Vance Johnson bullied and beat up the women in his life.
People couldn't believe it.
Knocking his first wife unconscious.
In Denver, the sports world's dirty little secret is a secret no more. Everybody knows that Denver Broncos wide receiver Vance Johnson assaulted his wives because he told them in a book co-written by one of his teammates. Vance Johnson began confiding in running back Reggie Rivers when they worked out together.
I was having a hard time trying to reconcile the stories that I was hearing with the guy that I was seeing every day.
What Reggie Rivers and thousands of fans saw in Vance Johnson was a superstar.
He started telling me a lot of stories about things that had happened in his career and in his life.
What Rivers was hearing were stories of 3 wives, 4 paternity suits, countless affairs, and repeated cases of physical abuse.
Vance is a guy who is predisposed to not being able to handle the fame or kind of getting out of control with it.
It just makes you feel like you're invincible.
He lost touch with what was reality.
You have hundreds of thousands of people screaming and yelling your name and wanting you to do well out on the football field. And when you get off the field, everywhere you go, everything's free. You would get pulled over by a police officer if you were speeding or something, and he wouldn't give you a ticket.
Police officers didn't give him tickets, and when he went to the movie theater, they didn't make him buy a ticket. They'd let him walk right in. He'd go to a restaurant, and managers would come over and say, "Hey, Vance, we want to pick up the tab on your meal." And everywhere he went, people treated him special, and so Vance began to think that he was special and he could do whatever he wanted. And whether that was beating up his wife or speeding in his cars or, doing whatever it was, he would just do it.
Vance Johnson has admitted to pushing his girlfriends, punching them, and in 1987, knocking his first wife unconscious.
I pushed her against the closet door.
Pushed her against the closet door. She became unconscious. I mean, what made you abusive, do you think?
I think growing up, it was all I knew. It's all I saw.
According to Johnson, his abusiveness was born in the same place he was, on the violent streets of a Trenton, New Jersey ghetto.
It comes from somewhere, and it's fueled by something.
The more success Vance Johnson earned, the less control he exercised.
I felt like a god.
Vance was in a different strata of fame than I am. I came into the league a little bit differently because I was a free agent, so I was an unheralded player. No one knew who I was.
If you were a superstar, how easy would it be to stay on the right side of the line?
I think it would be a much greater challenge.
No, don't even put me in that category. Oh, no. Are there people who you know now who you think may fall over that line, may step over the line?
I think there are plenty of guys on our team who are already over that line.
4 years ago, Vance Johnson strayed across that line once again.
Vance Johnson is scheduled to surrender at the Arapahoe County Jail next Tuesday.
I spent time in that jail right there.
Right near the football field.
Right across near the football field.
According to police reports, Vance Johnson had been following his wife, Shree, around.
After a heated argument with his second wife, he rammed his car into hers.
Smashing into the left front fender of Shree's white sports car.
Finally, the NFL star was sent to jail for 1 week. Not for hitting his wife, but for hitting her car.
Johnson will also be on probation for a year.
And when you were in jail, I mean, could you look out and see this practice field here?
When I was in jail, it was dark. I couldn't see anything.
Rivers believes that dark jail helped Johnson see the light.
I think going to jail kind of opened his eyes because he got into group counseling and he started to understand how abusive he was.
Now there's such a big problem with this domestic violence, and basically I'm the only man that's standing up that had a problem with it, that wants to say that there was a way out and that, yes, I was an abusive man. I feel like I'm the only one, and I feel lonely.
Jerry Quarry. Ahead on 48 Hours.
It was a combination of taking punches to the head.
A victim of violence in the arena.
He forgets how to eat. He forgets how to put on his shoes.
The heartbreaking story of a champion on the ropes.
Yeah, I feel like an old man.
And
it's pretty fun to hit a kid.
Facing the future.
We teach kids to be aggressive. Yeah, we teach that.
Does this coach have a winning game plan?
Good hit! You come up like a rocket. Good job.
48 Hours will continue. 48 Hours, Violent Athletes continues. Here again is Dan Rather.
Sports-related violence can change lives forever, leaving scars that may never heal. But as you're about to see, not all the victims are outside the arena.
Jerry Quarry first put on the gloves when he was 3 years old. By the time he was 8, Boxing Illustrated named Jerry the most popular professional boxer in the world. In 1968, 1995 inductee, heavyweight contender.
At the World Boxing Hall of Fame dinner, fans have come to honor one of the all-time greats.
Jerry Quarry.
You remember Jerry Quarry.
Quarry striking out from that corner.
The only man to take on both Muhammad Ali twice and Joe Frazier twice.
This is a slugfest.
It's all over. Sure, he lost the big fights.
You continue.
But back then, he was a contender.
The guy is one of a kind. He really is.
Tough, big heart. Shavers is in trouble.
Jerry Quarry gave his heart to boxing, but he also gave his mind.
The winner by a knockout, Jerry Quarry.
This is Jerry Quarry today.
How do you feel these days, Jerry?
I feel I feature myself, but it's a little old, you know.
You feel old?
I feel like an old man.
Jerry is only 50 years old. He lives with his brother James.
He loves Coca-Cola.
Because he can't take care of himself anymore.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. The old name is called the punch-drunk fighter.
The medical name for it is dementia pugilistica, and it's the price many young fighters pay for years of doing this.
He's simply taken too many shots to the head.
It wasn't any one particular fight. It was a combination of over the years of taking punches to the head.
Imagine 2 decades of your head being knocked around with this kind of force. And you can understand why Jerry Quarry can barely remember the biggest moments of his life.
You remember what they called you?
I don't remember that.
The Great White Hope.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Irish Jerry Quarry.
He still has a couple of moves.
That's it. I quit.
But he's living in a world of his own.
Jerry Quarry's not new. Jerry Quarry's the latest in a series.
New York sports columnist Phil Mushnick says there are Jerry Quarrys in every sport today.
We're getting 29-year-old professional ball players who are leaving the game because they sustained so many shots to the head. This was football. There were rules against getting hit in the head. Why aren't these rules being enforced? It's because violence sells.
And English going at each other.
What is it about watching violence? I mean, we could watch a game of skill.
I can't, I'm a hockey fan. I don't think I've ever turned my head away from a TV set during a hockey fight.
Oh, McCarty lands a couple of rights. Now Walker's...
I think it's part of the human condition, and it's part of the human condition that marketeers at boxing and football and basketball know how to exploit to the fullest.
An uppercut scores another one, 3 in a row.
Most sports fans, no matter what age, steeped in violence, who celebrate violence.
They want blood.
They want blood.
The referee has stopped the contest. Well, you heard some boos from the crowd.
But you see what we're doing?
Back home in California, Jerry Quarry is getting ready for his big night.
Do you know what's going on tonight?
No.
You're being inducted to the World Boxing Hall of Fame. He gets now where he forgets how to eat. He forgets how to put on his shoes. He forgets how to comb his hair. He forgets how to take a shower and shave. We have to do this ourselves for him.
Well, you're the one doing a lot of it, too.
Yeah.
$2 million in lifetime earnings squandered. No health insurance. So how does he support himself?
Jerry is on SSI of $614 a month, and I supplement the rest of it. Tonight's your night, buddy. You bet. We wish that Jerry could appreciate his life at 50, and we knew he would have if he didn't have this affliction.
But tonight, at least, he'll have the appreciation of his fans.
Love you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Quarry, Q-U-A-R-R-Y, a Q.
Okay, Jerry.
A Q, Q. Draw a circle and a line through it, remember?
What does that say about us? If we care about this guy as a sports hero, to let him end up like this?
Who says we cared about him? We may say, gee, I really like Jerry Quarry, whatever happened to him, but who really cared about him? We cared about him for the moment he was in the ring.
The winner by a knockout, Jerry Quarry.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Finally, the moment of the evening.
the greatest of the great white hopes, Jerry Quarry.
And James Quarry steps in to help his brother.
We thank you very, very much.
As he always does.
Jerry's very proud. He really doesn't fully understand what is happening to him tonight. But
When we look at a guy like Jerry Quarry, what kind of lesson should we take away from this?
The lesson we can learn is that it's preventable, but who's going to prevent it? As long as people buy the tickets, enjoy the blood, it's going to persist.
Shut games. We won't let dogs fight. We won't let chicken fight because we care about the animals. But yet we'll let two men get in the ring and beat each other's brains out.
James has set up the Jerry Quarry Foundation to help other fighters in need.
When Jerry was on top, #1 contender, he helped me out, and this is what family's all about.
Jerry Quarry.
You remember Jerry Quarry.
Put him in the mug.
He paid the ultimate price for being a good sport.
I've been in the ring many times, and I've enjoyed every one of them because there is no quit in the game for me. I love you.
And still ahead, we take time out with the athletes.
Just because someone beat up on a girlfriend, I think it's really blown out of proportion.
You know, y'all sort of put us on a pedestal.
It takes players. It takes great players to win, and Nebraska's had them for over 30 years.
On the field, Nebraska is still a winner,
Hezakya is there, knocks it down.
even with Lawrence Phillips on the sidelines.
They took Arizona State apart this afternoon.
But off the field,
We've had a lot of contact with him this week.
there are still plenty of questions for Coach Osborne about Phillips' future.
I hope he's okay, and he knows we care.
I'm here to talk about abuse.
That care extends to the entire team. This is an anti-violence seminar.
If you're tempted to get in a fight, if there's somebody who pushes you and you have to respond, you're weak. You're weak and you're not smart.
There are two sides to every controversy, but this one counseling session is the only part of Nebraska's side the university would allow us to cover. So with Nebraska refusing to answer tough questions about violence off the field, we turn to the team which battled the Cornhuskers most of the season to be #1 in the nation.
Personally, I think it's really blown out of proportion.
It's not just something that happens to athletes.
Just because someone beat up on a girlfriend or, I mean, the girl should get out of that situation anyway.
They're players at Florida State University in Tallahassee.
If Clay Shiver gets in trouble when he's out in a bar, it'll be in the paper the next morning. But if Joe Blow gets in trouble out at a bar, the whole nation's not going to find out.
And Clay Shiver, star FSU center, agrees. Part of the problem is life in the spotlight.
Is there ever a time when you're walking around and you're just Clay Shiver, Florida State University student?
You know, y'all sort of put us on a pedestal where the students kind of see us as almost as untouchable. But, you know, in our minds, we're the same as they are.
The same, he says, even when you ask about athletes and violence.
I don't believe there's any kind of correlation at all, and you know, I think they have a statistic for everything.
We've looked at 325 felony complaints.
Sports researchers Jeff Benedict and Alan Klein disagree.
There is no question that sport has a role in these cases.
There is a view of women that begins back in high school as the star quarterback, moves on to college where women are at their disposal. Now, there's a small group of athletes that see all women as never being able to say no and take them one way or another.
Biggest chance these kids have is to stay so doggone active in athletics that they won't go out and violate the laws and violate the rights of women.
FSU coach Bobby Bowden.
The things that are happening to athletes, I hate to say it, but the same thing is happening throughout our society.
He admits his team has had problems too. Still, he sees sports as a solution.
The big thing athletics does give them a shot at, we do try to discipline. There are plenty of kids out there on that street don't know what discipline is. You've got 100 football players, you probably got 90% of them you never have a problem with. You got about 10, you know, they might get into a few things. But I'll be honest with you, we're not going to cover it, we're not going to let it get by.
But researcher Benedict says some coaches do.
The few athletes who commit these acts are welcomed in just as warmly by the coaches as long as they can perform on the field.
Back in Nebraska, Lawrence Phillips has now pled no contest to the brutal attack on Kate McEwen. And then he breaks his silence with a phone call.
I did wrong. Everybody does wrong, and I just got to take care of it.
I was really against him coming back to the team, but I think that, you know, he deserves a second chance.
The call convinces Omaha talk show host Tom Becca.
I was just saying I was sorry and that, you know, I just reacted without thinking.
How much do you want to punish this guy?
There will be many groups that they just want his head on a platter, but that doesn't solve anything.
And increasingly, Coach Osborne seems to agree.
To take the one thing that has given his life organization and meaning and coherence away from him probably is not the right way to attack a problem.
What can be done to curb violence off the playing field? Coming up.
We teach kids to be aggressive. Yeah, we teach that.
Tackling the issue at an early age.
You see what I did that quarterback?
Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska. Football is in the air.
And in just moments, you'll see the first red-clad warrior.
And on the air.
We're going to run out to that famous tunnel formed by the band. I want you to hear it when it happens.
Since today's Cornhusker game isn't on TV,
make a tackle.
Kerry Crosby is watching another game on the set.
We're set for kickoff in Game 3 of the 95 season.
While he and his family listen to the home game on radio.
Arizona State to kick it off.
When you're used to doing this, you can listen, talk, watch.
Tommy takes the snap. Here's the zone play. Clinton got a block by McNamara. 35, 40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 30. First play from scrimmage.
Touchdown! Touchdown!
He's gone! 65 yards.
Kerry Crosby knows a good play when he hears one and when he sees one.
You come up like a rocket.
Crosby teaches football to his 11-year-old son Tyson and 135 other kids.
Quickness. You got to be quick.
As head coach for the Midget League team sponsored by Lincoln's Police Department. Out on this playing field, Kerry Crosby is teaching kids about sportsmanship, discipline, teamwork, giving it all you've got.
Got to keep your heads in the game, stay focused.
But these kids are also learning another lesson. Hit and hit hard.
Good hit!
When you see one of these youngsters really level the opponent, lay him out flat, run over him, how does it make you feel?
Pretty good unless the opponent doesn't get up. You have to be aggressive. It's just the nature of the sport.
Crosby knows all about kids being tough off the field, too.
Okay, I'm Officer Crosby, and we need to talk about something that happened on the first.
He's an officer in the Lincoln Police Juvenile Division.
We see more violent behavior in kids these days. You just can't be doing this kind of stuff anymore. It's not acceptable behavior. And as a police officer and a father, and hopefully a role model to a lot of young people, scares me to death because of the level of aggressive behavior out there with young people. Because this is really dumb, and I think you know it was.
Do you see an irony at all in what you do? You're encouraging these youngsters to be aggressive when they're here, and when they're out in society, you're discouraging it.
It's appropriate to teach aggressive behavior here in the performance or playing of a game. Aggression and violent behavior, unfortunately, is a big part of society today. But the playing of sports and games has nothing to do with it.
Sports is an influence that can be very positive for a lot of young people.
Massachusetts psychologist Elizabeth Englander, who studies why some young people become violent, is wary of playing the blame game.
I think that Americans tend to really want to find one simple answer to this problem. It's television, or it's football, or it's this, or it's that, and it's never one of those things. If I've learned anything, it's that it's an additive factor. Everything adds up.
So how does sports fit into the equation? It depends on what kids hear from their coach.
I mean, it's one thing to say, congratulations, good job for winning.
You scored a touchdown? Nice job!
And it's another thing to say, that other team, they're the enemy. I want you to kill them, I want you to crush them, I want you to destroy them.
We have a certain expectation that they be aggressive out here.
Get him, Tyson! Good coverage, Tyson. Way to go, yeah!
It's pretty fun to hit a kid. Did you see what I did, that quarterback?
But then when they leave here, that the expectation is they leave that aggression on the field. And we make that real firm to them.
Because usually you can't hit them like at school. That was awesome!
Tyson's excited when he comes home. He's rowdy, he's ready to go. And you have to just, okay, you're home now, tone it down, settle down. It's tough. It's tough to do. Carrie does it a whole lot better than I do.
Way to recognize it. Good job. What I stress when they walk away from here, and their parents stress, and their teachers stress, and the other people in their life, their church youth group leaders, their scout leaders, is no, that is inappropriate. So I don't think it's too much to expect out of kids.
But what's true for some kids may not be true for every kid.
For a child who's very mixed up about a lot of things, who sees a lot of violence in his background, it may not make any sense for him to turn it off. Playing football might just be one more situation where people say to you, it's not only okay to be aggressive, it's good to be aggressive.
I always tell my kids that I coach, number one, they're not playing pro football here. It's a game. It always will be a game. Unless, of course, you start doing it for money. But this is a game, and we just want to have fun.
Police! Police! Police!
Great job!
Now an update on the University of Nebraska's Lawrence Phillips. Aaron?
Lawrence Phillips is shortly expected to be sentenced for the attack on Kate McEwen. After almost 2 months of counseling, Phillips is again part of the team.
Just like to start by saying I appreciate Coach Osborne giving me another chance to come out here and play. And
on January 2nd, he's expected to play in the Fiesta Bowl as the Cornhuskers go for the national championship.
He was pounding her head against the wall.
As for Kate McEwen, she's back playing basketball. As we told you earlier, we asked Coach Tom Osborne to appear on 48 Hours. He declined, but just this week he did call me. He insists it is not his intention to interfere with the legal system or influence witnesses. He says that all he's trying to do is make sure his players get a fair shake in a system he claims works against high-profile athletes. Dan?
Thank you, Aaron. Champion athletes represent the best of what we can be. At the University of Nebraska and elsewhere, most athletes remain true to that ideal. They still strive to be the finest, on the field and off. I'm Dan Rather, and that's 48 Hours. Coming up next, your late local news. Now a look ahead to our next report.
I'm scared to death that something's going to happen to her when I'm not around.
Hi, I'm looking for this little dog, Pepper.
When you don't watch the kids,
She intentionally knew she was breaking the law.
They have no life to them.
can you trust who does?
I've seen horror stories of a babysitter hitting another child over with a spoon.
I need to see what they are doing with my children.
Little brown collie.
Oh my God.
Next week.
For a transcript, send $6 to 48 Hours Transcripts, Box 7, Livingston, New Jersey, 07039. And to order a VHS cassette of tonight's broadcast, call 1-800-338-4847.